Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Having utterly failed at containing the virus and protecting Americans, President Trump is now going to try to lie to you about the death toll. It was only, of course, a matter of time before we reached this point, but here's the headline from the Daily Beast. Team Trump pushes Centers for Disease Control to revise down its COVID death counts. The White House has pressed the CDC in particular to work with states to change how they count coronavirus deaths and report them back to the federal government. And Dr. Deborah Birx, the coordinator of the administration's coronavirus task force, has urged CDC officials to exclude from coronavirus death count reporting some of those individuals who either did not have confirmed lab results and are presumed positive, or who have the virus and may not have died as a direct result of it. The president's task force is now pressuring the CDC and state officials to change the metrics they use to count deaths so that they are lower. Now, this is despite the fact that we know the actual tabulated counted deaths that we have are absolutely undercounted. It's hard to find an expert who has looked at this who does not agree. In fact, just yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci was asked by Senator Bernie Sanders if the death toll could be as much as 50% higher than the official number. And here's how Dr. Fauci responded.
Most of us feel that the number of deaths are likely higher than that number because given the situation, particularly in New York City, when they were really strapped with a very serious challenge to their healthcare system, that there may have been people who died at home who did have COVID, who were not counted as COVID because they never really got to the hospital. So in direct answer to your question, I think you are correct that the number is likely higher. I don't know exactly what percent higher, but almost certainly it's higher.
Almost certainly it is higher than the numbers we have, higher than the nearly, as of today, 85,000 people, which is where we are now. New York City took the most scrupulous look at this, as Dr. Fauci was talking about. It has, of course, the highest recorded death toll of any city in the world, but it has still missed thousands of deaths. And when experts go back and they look at excess mortality, which is when you compare the amount of people who died in a given year to the year before and the year before that same time of year, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths that are not in the official tallies. Back in April, the city found 3,700 excess deaths. And then earlier this week, the number was revised up to include 5,000 more deaths that were not counted. That's nearly 9,000 previously uncounted deaths right there, in addition to the tens of thousands that we know about. The official figure we have does not actually represent the true size of the devastation and the loss that we as Americans have experienced. And thousands of people are still dying every day. There are still hundreds of people dying in New York and New Jersey. It's even getting worse in other states. Illinois just had its highest one-day death total. The model the White House has reportedly relied on, the one that predicted 60,000 deaths, is now projecting 140,000 by early August. The deaths are real, and they are mounting, and the White House knows it. But the approach all along has been to ignore it. And when that did not work, they tried to bury the inconvenient information that got in the way of their plan to reopen. Last week, the AP reported the Trump administration buried a CDC report with step-by-step guidance on how and when to reopen. On Monday, NBC News exclusively obtained a report by the Pandemic Task Force showing coronavirus rates spiking in heartland communities. And then today, we learned about yet another shelved report, a 63-page CDC report with a far more detailed and restrictive plan for reopening than the White House's guidance released last month. Tonight, we learned that the president's nominee to be the nation's top consumer safety watchdog was involved in sidelining those detailed guidelines. Report after report from the Trump administration's own experts buried. And so now, the president's strategy is to lie about the extent of the losses, try to make them disappear using the same tactics widely believed to be used by foreign authoritarian regimes. Of course, this is in line with what has been the president's approach to the virus since the very beginning. He never for a second saw it as a real crisis to be solved, not as an actual threat to the American people that must be dealt with, but simply as a challenge to his re-election, as a set of numbers, a rating system where he was determined to get good ratings. And so back on March 6th, the president gave the game away. Remember, thousands of Americans were trapped on a ship where coronavirus was spreading, a situation where any good leader would want to take them off the ship and test them and treat them. I mean, anyone, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, anyone with a brain, anyone with any shred of empathy or decency, anyone with any sense of public duty, anyone. Americans stranded on a ship with the virus. The president, though, did not want to take them off. No. Despite the fact that he was being urged to by the experts around him, he didn't want to take them off, and he explained to us why. And his answer is the skeleton key to understanding the entirety of the response thus far.
They would like to have the people come off. I'd rather have the people stay, but I'd go with them. I told them to make the final decision. I would rather, because I like the numbers being where they are. I don't need to have the numbers double because of one ship. That wasn't our fault.
I like the numbers being where they are. I don't need to have the numbers double because of one ship. It wasn't our fault. I don't need the numbers doubling. Me, Donald Trump. Been his impulse from the very beginning. Ignore the problem, say it will go away like a miracle, bury facts that get in the way, and then when all else fails, because it does fail, because the virus doesn't care, then you just try to juke the stats. As if people won't actually know that their loved ones are dying. As if you could actually use propaganda to make someone forget that someone they loved in their life who was here a week ago is now gone forever.